Hey guys, so today I want to start a series of videos where we dive into the basics of Path of Exile 2 based off of my knowledge of Path of Exile 1 to hopefully demystify a lot of the areas that people think are very confusing or people are like, should I really dive into this game because it seems a little bit too complicated. So today we're going to be talking about three things. We're going to talk about classes, we're going to be talking about the skill tree, and we're going to be talking about currency. Now, before we dive into those specific parts, I know a lot of you guys are probably on the fence for playing Path of Exile 2 because you're like, well, Path of Exile 1 was very complicated. And do I really want to dive headfirst into that? Well, one, this series is hopefully to demystify some of those, but two, I think that there's a very big difference between complicated as a requirement versus complicated as like a piece of content for people who are interested in that complexity and depth dive into it, because I think Path of Exile 1, while it was very complicated and there was a lot of depth, I think that anybody who wanted to play the game and just beat the game normally and get to the end game, you can do that without having to deal with a lot of the complicated systems in the game. You really could just go online, follow a guide, like word to word, letter to letter, basically, and be able to get through the entire game just fine. And over time, you'll learn about the different complex systems. And if you want to dive into those, you can. But if you didn't want to dive into them, you really didn't have to. You could be a pretty casual player and still play Path of Exile. So with that out of the way, I wanted to dive into the first thing, which is classes in Path of Exile. Now, in Path of Exile 2, there are 6 currently announced classes with a total of 12 at release. Those classes are going to be the Mercenary, the Monk, the Witch, the Sorceress, the Warrior, and the Ranger. Now, those 6 classes will each have 2 ascendancies each at early access, and later on will have 3 each. And a lot of people are probably thinking of this as like a class in any other game, where it's like, okay, your class really determines what you're going to play, what your skills are, and such. Well, Path of Exile 2 is not like that. Well, Path of Exile in general is not like that. You can choose a class which can somewhat define your playstyle, but you're not limited to that specific playstyle. For example, right now I'm on a Ranger class, and if we open up the class itself, the class determines where you are put on this skill tree when you first start. For example, I start right here as a Ranger, right? But if you played as a duelist, you would start here. If you played as a marauder, you'd start here. If you play as a Templar, you start here. You play as a witch, you start here. And if you played as a shadow, you start here. Those are the classes in Path of Exile 1, and also Scion right here in the middle, right? But as you can see, all of these skill nodes in the skill tree are connected. So even if you, for example, start off as a ranger, you could end up going up this tree like I did, up to where these shadow nodes are. So your class itself doesn't necessarily dictate anything other than where you start on the tree. And in addition to that, the ascendancy that you choose. Now, the ascendancy itself is going to be something that is a little bit more linked and limited to your class. While these ascendancies do give you some specific things that certain builds will want more than others, they're not necessarily things that are going to tie you down to build or a class as well. Now, if you see here, all of these are going to be little kind of passive bonuses, right? Global accuracy, projectile speed, all these things kind of lean towards a class that plays projectiles. But it doesn't mean that necessarily if you pick what I picked here, which is the Deadeye Ascendancy, it doesn't mean that you have to play a bow class, right? All of these are basically just projectile bonuses, and you could play any projectile class in the game or any projectile skill in the game and still be able to benefit from some of these nodes. So your class itself really doesn't dictate much other than where you start on the skill tree and what ascendancy you choose, which again, at the end of the day, can dictate your playstyle, but at the same time, isn't going to be limiting your playstyle to just one thing, which I think is the beauty of Path of Exile. You can really just tailor your class and your build to whatever you want. So if you wanted to, let's say, play a ranger that uses spells, you can definitely do that. If you want to play a ranger that uses melee weapons, you can do that as well. It's really flexible for what you want to do in that certain situation. And as long as you make a build around it that works, that's all that really matters. Now, since we're here in the passive tree already, I want to talk a little bit more about the passive tree itself. Now, people have seen this passive tree and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. I have no idea what to do on this passive tree, and I don't want to learn it, to be honest, right? And to be frank, I don't really want to learn the in-depth details of the passive tree either. Now, as I've played the game more and more over time, I've learned what's good and what's bad, but at the same time, I'm not the type of person that's going to go out and tinker around and build a new build every single league. Normally, I just go online and find what the best builds are made by other people, and I just follow it. Just like any other game, any other MMO, any other ARPG, you don't need to be the inventor of the wheel for the game. You really can just go and find another build. For example, right here, you have the Zizzarin's strongest build I've ever played for the League starter for 3.25 for Path of Exile, right? He puts a POB link, which is a Path of Building link, and you could basically just go here and you could see his equipment, everything, his skill tree, all that. And if this is a little bit too hard to read, POB is Path of Building, right? Which is an actual program that you have in Path of Exile. Well, not in Path of Exile, but you download it. And with this, all you need to do is just copy and paste the build into this, and it'll put it into a much more succinct and understandable and easy to read format where you can see every single thing that the person does. Like, you could really see every single person, from the skill tree to the skills themselves that they use to the items that they're using and things like that. Now, there's no guarantee that we'll have anything that's one-to-one to Path of Building for PoE 2, but I'm pretty sure people are going to come up with something similar. And we'll be able to use that to help us in our ability to build our characters if we don't want to be the ones to, again, reinvent the wheel every single time. And there's already some information known about the Path of Exile 2 skill tree, so I'm sure people are already kind of tinkering around with it and trying to figure out good builds that they might post day one or week one that you can see to really just go off of them. Just like, all right, I don't want to think, I just want to do this, so I'm just going to go grab this build somebody else made and just go with it. It really isn't super complicated. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, it looks very complicated on the surface, and it is complicated, but you don't have to dive into the complicated mess that is the Path of Exile skill tree. You can really just go off of what other people do and then just copy it, copy their homework, and then play the game normally. It really isn't something that you need to involve yourself too deeply unless you are the type of person that wants to do it, which in case, go ahead, have fun. Not for me, but maybe for you. And one of the great things about PoE 2 is that if you are somebody who does want to dive into learning the skill tree, but you feel like you just don't know enough about the game, well, refunding skills in Path of Exile 2 is extremely easy. Now, in Path of Exile 1, you get some free refund points, right? Like you see, I have level 7 refund points left right now for my passives. I just click refund passives and I just untick some of these to get rid of nodes, right? But if I don't have, or if I have more skill tree nodes that I want to refund beyond the 7, I have to spend these currencies called regret orbs. Now in Path of Exile 2, they get rid of that system completely, and you have to spend the gold that you have in the game to refund, which from what I've seen is not very expensive. So you can feel free to experiment and try out different things, and if you feel like certain skill tree nodes just aren't good enough, then you could unspec out of them pretty easily and respec into other nodes. That's the thing that I think that Path of Exile 2 does really well compared to Path of Exile 1, and it really allows people to experiment and learn from experience and not just have to go off the guide if they don't want to and they feel like they're a new player and don't understand the tree very well. Now that wraps up the skill tree. Last thing that I wanted to go over today is currency. And this is something I feel like a lot of people might be a little bit confused hopping into the game, because in most other games, currency is like gold or silver or some form of like monetary, like money currency, right? While in Path of Exile 2, there will be gold as a currency. Gold is not something that is tradable, and it's not something that you're going to be using to barter with other players. In Path of Exile, the currency in the game are these orbs. A lot of times they're orbs. Sometimes they're not, but most of the time they're going to be orbs. As you can see here, I have a bunch of orbs and currency items laid out in my inventory. I have transmute orbs, chance orbs, augmentation orbs, chaos orbs, divine orbs, regal orbs, annulment orbs, alchemy orbs, and vol orbs. And I also have these whetstones and armor scraps. I have portal scrolls and wisdom scrolls. These are all the currency items that are confirmed ready to be in Path of Exile 2. Though I don't have exalted orbs in my inventory because they're kind of expensive, but it is what it is, right? So I have pretty much every single currency in the game that's going to be in Path of Exile 2 in here in my inventory, at least confirmed. And these are the currencies. So what I mean by currency is that these are what you're going to be using to be trading with other players. And in Path of Exile 1, the most common currency is Chaos Orbs. So you can think of this as like the dollar or something like that, or like a $10 bill. For the most part, you're going to be going around buying most of your things, and you can buy them with this. And nobody's gonna be like, why are you giving me so many of those, right? You can think of like wisdom scrolls as like pennies. You're not going to go out and buy these, buy groceries with all pennies. You're probably going to want to buy groceries with your dollar bills, like the Chaos Orbs. That's basically what these are. They're just different denominations of money. And you can see there's websites out there in Path of Exile that tell you what these different currencies are worth in Chaos Orbs. For example, the most expensive currency in this game, you could think of this as like, it's not even $100, it's way more than $100, but you kind of think of that as, in terms of currency, right? It's worth 143,000 Chaos Orbs. And the craziest thing is these currencies just drop from the game. Like, most of these currencies just drop from any old monster in the game. So you can just randomly become a Path of Exile bajillionaire just randomly playing the game, which is really, really cool in my opinion. Any of these currencies are going to be able to drop from the game from random monsters. There's some that are specific to certain types of monsters in certain areas or content, but for the most part, all of these currencies are going to be able to be dropped from every single monster in the game. So currencies in Path of Exile really are just kind of like different denominations of money. Like one's like $1, one's like a $10 bill, etc., right? And in order to see what the values are of these currencies, like how much is like one alchemy orb to a chaos orb, or like one chaos orb to alchemy orbs, right? You can go onto websites like this Path of Exile Ninja that we had in the past to see what the currencies are worth. But in the game as well, we're going to be having a exchange. So you can go ahead and be like, okay, I want chaos orbs and I have alchemy orbs. How much does it cost for one chaos orbs to alchemy orbs? So as you can see in this screen, it's 3 chaos orbs equals 1 alchemy orb in the market ratio, and that can fluctuate over time as the game progresses. So you can go ahead and use these systems in the game and also out of the game to see how much these currencies are worth, and you'll be able to exchange them very easily using this function in the game. So that's kind of the worth of the currencies. But the currencies themselves are also items, which is why they can drop from any monster in the game. And these currencies do different things, and I'm not going to go into in-depth on how to use them, but they basically are used as options for crafting your items. So for example, a very common situation you're probably going to run into in PoE 2 is going to be, okay, an item just dropped for me like this. What can I do with it? Well, I can add an augmentation orb to this to add another line to it. And then after I'm done with that, then I could use a regal orb to make it into a rare item. So you're going to be doing a lot of this in Path of Exile 2 as you're getting your items, because that's kind of one of the goals. They've made it so a lot of these currency items drop a lot more often, so you can go and kind of experiment and play around with crafting different items in the game. And using that, you'll be able to go and learn the crafting system in the game and figure out how to make stronger items over time. But again, if you don't want to kind of involve yourself in all this crafting, you can, at the end of the day, just use the currency as bartering material and just buy the items from other people. That again is one of the beauties of a game like Path of Exile, in my opinion, is that if you don't want to interact with a certain system, you don't have to. You just have other people do it for you, then you pay money for it. And then before I forget, for anything that you find on the ground, they're going to be unidentified. So all you need to do is use one of your wisdom scrolls and identify it, and then the stats will come out after that. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that you need to know about the 3 things, right? Classes, passive trees, and currencies. to get you started on your journey for Path of Exile 2. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos like this talking about the basic systems in Path of Exile to help kind of demystify some of these questions that you might have, let me know down in the comment section below. And also remember to subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be doing a lot more Path of Exile content going forward, and we'll definitely be playing the game a ton. And on top of that, I'll be streaming it, right? Twitch.tv/MisoXshiru. I stream every night starting at 10 p.m. PST. So when Path of Exile drops on Friday at this point, December 6th, I will be there playing it a ton. So hopefully I get to see you guys there on my stream, but if not, hopefully I'll see y'all on the next video. All right, guys, peace.